episode of the Atlantic CIL podcast. I'm here with one of our board members, one of my favorite board members. Not that there's a ranking, Dave.
Oh, now I got to pay you off for that.
Okay. Yes, well, Dave Delaney. He's a minister. He used to do public relations for Social Security and just knows a lot about disability in this world and also kind of what this world needs to move forward as we go through a really challenging time, you know, a pandemic, a war in Europe. We're just doing all of history in one swoop. I read on Facebook. I'm like, I agree with that. So, Dave, let me start with the first question I always ask everybody, usually. What is your connection to disability? How'd you get into this disability advocacy world?
Well, first of all, people need to know I spell disability with small dis and ability in capital ABILTY. So when I say disability, I always say it in a way to make sure the dis is minimized and the ability is enhanced. It's strange, Donald, and you don't know this because this will be new to you.
Yes.
Back when I was in high school, when we had study halls or, free time when you weren't in class, you could go to the library, whatever. I went and helped in what we called the special ed class. I would just go for maybe a half hour and help the teacher help. And I don't know why. I don't have a good explanation as to why, but that was really, in a way I do. Junior high guilt, because in junior high school, the boys in gym picked on the kids who had disabilities because they were different than us. And by the time I was in high school, I realized that was wrong. And that was my first, and I just did it, no credit, no points, no special diploma. I was just, hey, here's David Delaney here to help us today. Hey, can you stack those papers? Can you help Dave? One of the guys was named David. I don't remember his last name. It was a big guy who had autism. Help David a little bit, would you? And then I would go from that. And then I went off to college and university, and the Social Security Administration hired me after college. And immediately I was put in positions with the government that focused on the services Social Security provided for people with disabilities. Little did I know that in 1985, my first child would be born with cerebral palsy. And that was the final link in my life to serving and caring for people with disabilities. But I've had a very strong connection with the mental health community all my life. As a pastor a couple of years ago, it seemed like every suicide in South Jersey, the family members were contacting me to pray or talk with me after their loved one chose to take their lives. So it's been an interesting journey, but my daughter Megan solidified my connection. My job focused in on it, and it goes back to high school. So there's a long answer.
Wow, that's amazing how everything's kind of connected, and it kind of culminated with your daughter. How did you get into Social Security? I know we were talking about that a little offline, but what made you choose that after college?
Well, I didn't. It was my degree. My undergraduate degree is I have a history and education. My two majors at university. I was going to be a middle school social studies teacher. That was my job goal. I played all the right cards to know everybody that you needed to know to get a job. But back 150 years ago, when I graduated college, there were no teaching jobs available. And in my senior year at University of Buffalo, I took what was then called the PACE exam, which covered a whole lot of different federal jobs. My father made me take it. I did not want to take it, and I took it for my dad, just get him off my case.
Right.
And as soon as I graduated, I was contacted by 4 different federal agencies, one of which was the Social Security Administration. They all called me in for interviews. I was offered a job. Well, I don't know if I'd have been offered a job by 2 of them, but Social Security and the Department of Agriculture both offered me jobs. And Social Security seemed to fit with my history background. And so I took it, and I didn't expect to stay. I figured I'll do this for a year or 2, and then I'll do something else.
Now, you were in public relations. Were you right away in public relations of Social Security, or was it? How did you get there?
And again, it was a reflection on my degree. I was hired as a claims representative. Very quickly in Glassboro, New Jersey, management gave me some added responsibilities of interacting with some other agencies in the community. And then I moved back to Western New York to Niagara Falls. And this woman had a job called field representative. She was moving to California, so her job was open. I had already decided to do what you did and go to law school. I had taken my law boards. I was all set to go back to the University of Buffalo Law School. The paperwork was done. I had been accepted. And my manager came to me and said, David, you are going to put in for Rita's job. I said, not really. He says, you are going to put in for Rita's job, aren't you? Now, when your boss who makes the decision on getting an improvement in your job, giving you a new job, a better job, tells you you are going to put in, I put in, I got the job. And as soon as I got the job, he said, forget everything that Rita did. You're my public relations manager. I have money to pay for you to go back to take courses at University of Buffalo, Niagara University. So you know what you're doing. But you are now in charge of public relations for our office. And I knew nothing about public relations. And that launched me. His name is Nick George. He's still with us. He's still my friend. And
I love your boss giving you subtle hints. I appreciate that.
You are. This. And it was me, because public relations is basically teaching. You are teaching people about things they don't know. You're teaching them about an agency, about a benefit program. And I became me and ran with it. And for 31 years, I was with the federal government and started just in the Niagara Falls area, got a promotion to Southern New Jersey, got to work at the National Press Office, was close to several commissioners who were appointed by the president. It was a cool job. I was on some national committees, and that was my journey.
Oh, that's awesome. What did you like best about, I know you talked about working for Social Security, and what were the challenges you saw in the systems, or kind of the barriers in the systems that existed for people with disabilities? What was kind of the stuff that would make you a little frustrated?
I think the misconception or lack of understanding of the system was always frustrating, because there would be people who thought they deserved to get benefits who clearly did not meet the law. And regulations have finite definitions of what each kind of disability is. And somebody might not be able to do the job they were used to doing, but they could do a job at a lesser rate of pay somewhere else. Well, they're not disabled under the law.
Right.
It's not that, oh, you were earning $70,000 a year as a truck driver driving across the country. Well, now I'm sorry, but you only can do a desk job and earn $30,000. Well, that was frustrating, because they would come screaming at me. At the end, I got the screamers and the yellers. I was a public relations guy. The other part, and there's two disability, you know this, but some people listening might not know this. There is Social Security insurance, and there's SSI, Supplemental Security Income. Two totally different programs.
Exactly.
Social Security disability insurance is an insurance. You pay in, or your parent paid in, and your protection and your benefit amount is based on what you paid into the system. If you never worked and you became disabled after age 21, you will not be eligible for that program.
Exactly.
SSI, Supplemental Security Income, is an income-based needs program. You're only allowed to have so much in the bank, so much income in a month, and you have to have a disability that keeps you from working for at least 12 months. I will tell you, my youngest daughter, Colleen, when she was 12 years old, and she is now this year 32 years old. So when she was 12 years old, she went with me and the Camden County Disability Advisory Committee to Washington, D.C. to fight to make the amount of money a person with a disability can have in the bank to have go up every year by the rate of inflation. So each year, whatever the cost of living, because back 20 years ago, the most a person on SSI could have in the bank was $2,000. Yes. 20 years later, the most anybody can have in the bank is $2,000.
Exactly.
And that, to me, is nonsense. It's evil. And that was the thing when I worked for Social Security, frustrated me, because you would have people who were saving money, wanted to save money, wanted to have money put aside. And I had to say, Don't you dare have a month where you have $2,001. Spend it, give it away. Don't you dare get in a risk.
This is a great point, David, that that one of the frustrations, and all those years later, I have the same frustrations, is that requirements like that prevent people with disabilities from saving, really trap them in poverty. Because if you can't build savings, how can you progress? And, people wonder sometimes, because I remember reading a stat, most people who get on disability, either SSI or SSDI, they don't get off it. And people go, why don't people do that? Well, one of the biggest reasons is because, a lot of your benefits are attached to it. And when you're on, especially SSI, you're limited. So you don't really get to grow, any of your resources. So you become stuck.
And anybody who's listening, you have these Congress people and senators who talk about saving the value of investing money and making money and all this, especially the one political party. And the one political party is the one who has blocked this year after year after year after year. They don't want people with disabilities to be able to save more than $2,000. You can save 2001, you lose your Medicaid. Then you have to fight to get your Medicaid. And if you have somebody with severe medical needs where they need either a care attendant or they need, whatever it is evil. And we've allowed it to go on. And the thing is, it's one party has fought it and fought it and fought it. And all it needs to be, they're afraid too many people are going to qualify or they're going to get rich while they're on SSI. SSI, you're not going to get rich because if you're by yourself, you're only going to make it most about $850 thereabout. And I tell you, in today's world, you are not going to get rich on $850 a month.
That's exactly right. And it's anti-savings, it's anti-work. So people should really think about these laws and their effects on people. And I think if we reformed them, I think more people would get off them. Because
and all they have to do, and so anybody listening, our two U.S. senators, I know Senator Booker is in favor of cost of living adjusting it. Senator Menendez, if you're down in our area, unfortunately, the congressman in our district opposes it, but still need to let him know that all you want is it cost of living adjusted. So if this year, with gas and everything going up, cost of living is going to be 8% maybe. So then the $2,000 goes up by 8%. So next year you can save that much more. If it goes up 1%, it goes up 1%. It's not making anybody sneak onto the system. And so anyhow, there you go, my passion. There you go, my passion.
And we'll link to an article in this podcast. There was a bipartisan proposal, imagine that, by, I believe it was Senator Rob Portman, a Republican out of Ohio, who's retiring, and then Senator, I believe, Sherrod Brown, who's a Democrat, and they have a proposal to lift those caps in SSI. So there's a wonderful bipartisan proposal that more people in Congress should look at and get behind. That would really benefit people with disabilities. Not only is it the moral thing to do, but it's the economically smart thing to do.
Well, it's moral. It's moral. And that's why I do not understand why the representative serving the Atlantic County area refuses to support it.
Yeah, I think it's disappointing and very short-sighted. But politicians being short-sighted, imagine that. That would be a new thing. So, but I love the way you explain the two programs, SSI and SSDI. People get confused all the time. For us, people call the center and they'll say, I'm on Social Security. And the first thing I ask is, which Social Security? Are you on SSI or are you on SSDI? Because as you know, that makes all the difference. What road you're on. So that's a good thing about the challenges. Have there been any improvements at Social Security since you've been there? There's been.
Oh, okay. Since I've been there. All right. Yeah. I would say back in the 1990s, which again, now for me, it's like a blink of the eye. For others, like, wow, that's way back in the ancient history. In the 1990s, probably actually starting with the first President Bush, not late 1980s, George H.W. Bush was a major advocate of disability rights. The ADA came when he was president.
Right.
And the idea of work incentives. So we're, again, we're sort of hitting the asset level or the resource level of SSI. But when I started with Social Security, a person with disability, you would tell them, don't you dare try a job because Social Security is going to cut you off if you start to work at all. Well, now there's incentives. So the big improvement in my lifetime with Social Security regulations, both SSI and SSDI, the insurance part, is that people with disabilities can try to go to work and see if they can work. And they can work at a certain level and not lose their benefits, except if they go over the $2,000 level.
Right,
but the income is not necessarily going to stop them from getting benefits. So it's a wonderful incentive. So you may have somebody who gets Social Security disability and they are able to do a job that maybe, that earns them $300 a week. Well, they're going to be able to have that job and still get their benefits. And the dollar amounts vary. So you go to the ssa.gov website for more information on that. But that was a huge change. But I would say since I left in 2008, there have not been any, and it's partly because the Republicans and Democrats in Washington now refuse to agree on anything with each other.
Right. Disability used to be, you were talking about how George H.W. Bush signed it. It used to be a very bipartisan issue. And even in today's polarized politics, that has even gone by the wayside. And the work incentives, I think, are beneficial. I would also always caution people, like you said, talk to your Social Security representative, because that matters too if you're on SSI and SSDI. If you're on SSI, you can work, but it's a little stricter. And if you're on SSDI, they have that trial work period.
And you have to be careful. You have to understand it. And that is a problem because it is governmentese. The language is not the same language you and I speak. And so you see these forms and you read it in a booklet or even the notices that come out. The government's required, because of court actions and other things, to add like 6 pages of words that you say, why is it there? Well, it's because courts have ordered them to put all this stuff there. And but the more verbiage there is, it's easy to get confused. So
and I would also stress, because I've done this before because I was on Social Security. Then when I started working at the CIL, I would also stress you really have to communicate with your local office to make sure they know what you're doing. Just because, you could think, oh, I let them know. I called the national number, but your local office may never have gotten that. Or by the time they get it, you've been working for
write down names, always.
Yes.
Write down names.
Right, exactly.
Date, time, document.
Right,
And
exactly.
the local office is the better place in Atlantic County and Egg Harbor Township. You communicate with them.
Right. But I just really want to stress, like, as a person with disability, as you start working, you have to take the responsibility. And it is a lot on a person because you can't go to Social Security, because if they find out you're working over the limit and you didn't let them know, you're going to have to pay that back and work something out with them. And you can't say, I didn't know.
Right.
That's not like a thing.
Well, and that's a really good point, Donald, because Social Security does send out every year when there's a cost of living adjustment, a letter that tells you all the things you have to report. And so you can't say, well, nobody ever told me. Well, yeah, they have. They told you 1,000 times over. Report change of address, report death, report if you go to work or if your condition improves so that you could go to work.
Right. And letting you know does not have to mean they personally knocked on your door and David came out of his car and explained to you everything. They sent you a letter. And they let you know when you get the program, they send you all this rules and stuff. So I was gonna call, and look, me and David are not saying if we were in charge of Social Security and could do the system, that this is how we would do it. We're just saying these are the rules. And I think what you're talking about being in public relations and getting yelled at for the rules, it's like, you didn't create the rules, you're just the guy.
That was part of the jobs, and he understood that.
Right. And let's talk about, so you also have always been into ministry, you're a minister, you have the whole spiritual background, which I think is awesome. So how'd you get into ministry? Well, You were going to be a teacher, then you became a lawyer, then your dad told you, what path in your life took you to ministry while you were doing
I've lived 1,000 lives.
Yeah.
I've always been a man of faith. I mean, even growing up, and I always was a youth leader. Whatever church I was at, I was always the guy who would be in charge of the teenagers, because teenagers was what I wanted to teach. I wanted to teach junior high. And so I did youth work stuff. And I've been a little bit of a church mutt. I was born Methodist, grew up Baptist, became Episcopalian, became Missouri Synod Lutheran, and then became United Methodist. And my second family's Roman Catholic. So I went to Mass a lot, and I have some good Jewish friends. So I went to synagogue, and I always joke, if I didn't shave my head, you would notice I have a built-in yarmulke on the back of my head.
Well, I like this. You were trying everything. You were trying
a little bit of everything. And I'm good friends with the imam in Atlantic City. And but
hedging your bets. I like this. You're hedging your bets.
That's it. But it was a faith thing. I had no intention of becoming a pastor ever. That would have been the last thing I would have ever done. And it was a strange religious moment. And, all I can say, I obviously believe in God. I believe that God's there. And I think that God's shaking God's mighty head all the time at all of us, saying, what the heck's going with you folks? But I was at Gardner's Basin for a concert. This was more than 20 years ago, jazz concert. And I don't wear, even now as a pastor, I'm wearing a Buffalo Bills jersey. I'm not wearing a shirt that says I love Jesus. But a man came up to me and asked me if I was a minister. And I said, no, I'm not a minister, but can I help you? Because I literally knew every clergy person in Atlantic City because of my public relations job, because of my radio TV work, because of my community activities. And he said, no, I thought you were a minister. I said, no, I work for the government. I'm getting myself a beer. My family's back there listening to this concert. See you, guy. Bye. Later that week, I was in a suit because that's what I wore it's hard to believe I'd wear a suit every day, but I did for work. And I was out at the old Borders bookstore at Mays Landing. And a lady came up to me and said, excuse me, are you a minister? And I said, no, I'm not a minister, but can I help you? She says, no, I thought you were a minister. I said, are you looking for a church? You're looking for a church? She said, no. And I said, well, I'm a Christian, but if you're looking for, no, I'm not. I thought you were a minister. I just wear a suit. I said, I work for the government. I wear a suit every day. And I wasn't in a religious section of the bookstore. And then the next week, I was actually at the Christian bookstore that used to be at Absecon. And I was getting some stuff for my youth group. And as I went to leave, there was a man who looked like he was homeless, opening the door, coming in. And we both froze, a foot apart. And he looked me in the eye and said, you're the new pastor in our community. I said, no, I'm not. I'm a youth leader. I work for the government. No, you're the new pastor in our community. God is calling you to be the new pastor in our community. I said, I'm not a pastor. Can I help you? No, you're a pastor. Now, he was going into the store. I was leaving. But when he finished, he turned around, walked out to the White Horse Pike and started walking towards Atlantic City. He never went into the store, which is where he was headed. I got to my car and I realized that over 2 weeks, 3 different people had had this conversation with me. And I called a friend, a casual friend who was the director of community relations at Cooper Medical Center in Camden, who was also a part-time minister, and he had played in the National Football League. And I called him up. I said, Larry, how did you know you were going to be a pastor? He said, Dave, it's a strange story. I said, I've got a strange story for you. And his story was almost parallel to mine. And then I knew I needed to ask questions. I still didn't think I was going to be a pastor until I was in my 60s. And lo and behold, I got 2 little churches in Cumberland County. And then I became the associate at Linwood in Atlantic County at Central United Methodist Church. And in 2008, it just seemed right for me to go full time and leave the government. And now I'm a pastor of St. Paul's in West Stepford.
Wow, I guess that's how God picks ministers. He sends random people to recruit people.
It was strange, believe me, unexpected.
Dave, I also like the way you seem to get jobs. It's like you just wander about and jobs just find you. I like that.
I'm looking for the $1 million job now. So.
Yes, people are like, hey, Dave, you want to be public relations? I don't know. I think you should be. Hey, Dave, you want to be A pastor? I don't know. I think you should be.
Yeah.
So how has being a pastor informed kind of your connection to disability, your thoughts about disability
Well,
and your daughter? Has that kind of mixed in?
no, Megan's life always has. I mean, for the moment we realized that Megan had a path that was going to be different than all of our friends' kids, and she was about a year and a half when we realized there was something seriously happening in Megan's life. But Megan, the connection with ministry, Megan is the most loving woman I know. She has hugged prostitutes, drug addicts. She's hugged governors, US senators, Grammy Award winners, Emmy Award winners. Megan shows love for all and all the major faith groups, whether it's Islam, Judaism, or Christianity. The basic tenet of all three is to love your neighbors and love God. And Megan fits in right there without, and then she's a reminder to me that what we see on the outside, a disability, that doesn't say the story of what that person's all about. And so, Megan Delaney to me is my hero. She knows she cannot read a book. No, and she'll never be able to read a novel, I should say. She can read first grade, second grade level stuff. But she's a great worker. She worked at Our Lady's Residence in Pleasantville as a volunteer, but they should have paid her. But she impacted so many people's lives as they were dying, as they were struggling. She'd go in their room and show them love and talk to them and give them amazing care. People would come to me and said, "Are you related to the Megan Delaney at Our Lady's Residence?" Because she rescued our aunt. Our aunt's last days were better because Megan Delaney was there. I said, "I have nothing to do with it. She's just my daughter. It's her."
Well, then you have something to do with it. You did a good job, but that's awesome. And I like your little aside. Please pay people with disabilities when they're doing cool, great work for you. But that's an awesome story, and I think that people with disabilities often have good insights of what people who are in vulnerable situations are dealing with, because they, can sometimes be on the outside of things. So
I think my actual ministry job, my pastoral job, has really found me more tied in with folks with mental health challenges, mental health disabilities, because I have a long background in that. I've served on mental health association boards. I was part of the mental health players improv group years ago that went and showcased how mental health people might respond when they have mental health problems. And I said, COVID, I started getting calls from all over South Jersey to me because they heard that the guy that was on the radio once in a while was a pastor and might be able to help when they were challenged with fear and anxiety. And as I said, the saddest and the toughest and sometimes satisfying when I can maybe help rescue is the area of suicide. And, I have a guy who OD'd, he survived, OD'd Friday, and he's now in the psych unit down in Vineland. And so in my ministry, I think I don't get that involved. I mean, I'm thrilled to be on Atlantic CIL, but I don't get involved with that many folks who have ongoing physically related disabilities. Our church is our church loves everybody. I will tell you a story, and it's about my church, not about me. We had a family call and say, "Would your church be upset if our son, who uses a wheelchair for mobility and is unable to communicate, comes to church one day?" I said, "Of course we wouldn't have a problem with that." Well, Cameron is 12, 13, he might be 13 now. Cameron has cerebral palsy, significant cerebral palsy. Use motorized wheelchair. He verbalizes, his sounds are his verbalization. And you know what I'm talking about, Donald.
yes, I do.
Okay. And he came wheeling into church with his mom and dad, and he was happy. So he went, ee, woo,
Right.
during worship, and our people all went and gave him love. Cameron's dad told me the last church they went to, the pastor asked them never to bring Cameron back to church because he disturbed the people.
Oh, that seems kind of inconsistent with God, but
So I'm blessed with the church family at St. Paul's that we love. He's not, COVID kept him away because, with all of his health issues, you couldn't risk getting COVID. But I see that as part of the mission is that, again, all three major faith traditions in the United States, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, the tenets are the same. You can read any of their holy books, the Quran, the Torah, the Bible. They all talk about loving all neighbors, loving God and doing justice. And I think when it comes to faith and worship and pastoring, I need to emulate that to those who hear me preach, those who see me in action. But I've got a great church that, they were the way they were before I got here. So I can't take credit for them.
Right. And I think it's important, no matter where we are, that people create welcoming organizations. Because I was going to ask you if you think something happened, because there was a reason why they asked you, would your church mind if we brought our son with a disability? And usually it's because you were somewhere and they did mind. And now you're nervous about that, which I think it's a really sad commentary on human nature sometimes.
Yeah.
People even have to think that a church of all places that should be the most welcoming of all places was not. So let's talk about mental health. I think that's a big topic because of COVID and everything going on in the world never stops. What got you interested in mental health? How'd you go down that path?
I don't know. Again, this is one of the David, I don't know. I experienced my wife's cousin went through an awful crisis when she gave birth. Now, she may have had some mental health issues that were underlying, but her husband served her divorce papers on the day she gave birth to their daughter. And she lost it. She totally lost it. And maybe I was inspired by my dad. My dad, surprisingly, to all of us, he didn't know this woman very much. He knew that it was my wife's cousin. He immediately stepped in and rescued her. Literally, she had to go into the psych center, but Dad was there for her while she was in the psych center. Came out, and that was about 1982, 83, around there. And it was then that I said, if Dad could do these things, I could do these things. One of the greatest challenges, and I was a union rep, and that was part of it. When you become a union rep, before I was in management, you start to hear people's issues and people's problems, and you realize that in a workforce of 50 people, 1 out of every 3 of them has a mental health challenge. That means 6 or 7 people in that workforce have a mental health challenge that's beyond just normal anxiety or fear. 1 out of every 3 of us, well, there's 2 of us here, so we'll blame it on the guy who's editing it. He could be the 3rd one who has the mental health challenge. You and I obviously don't have mental health challenges.
And now I think, I've struggled with anxiety and with stress, and I think that, one of the things we could do as people is just normalize it more for people, that anxiety and stress and those things, those mental health challenges are not out of the ordinary, especially in today's day and age.
And that sort of became where I was at. Once I started learning more, one of the early studies that I did a major paper on workplace burnout, and that had all sorts of mental health components. That was a union management thing at Social Security. We did a study on that for the whole administration. And I realized all of us walk a tightrope of life, our mental health balance, but it doesn't take a whole lot to push us off of that. So if I could be somebody who first is compassionate, trying to be compassionate, try to be somebody who can lift somebody up if they're falling and maybe catch them before they crash, that mattered. But there's a real challenge because the stigma of mental health, there's a stigma for all disabilities. You and I both know this.
Right, yes.
So, it's a shame, it's sad. And I hope some of the people listening, because we know that people listening to this are going to be advocates for folks with disabilities.
Right.
I hope they get people listening to this podcast every week who have no connection whatsoever, because it will help get rid of the stigmas that are there. But
right, I agree. And you may think you have no connection, but if you think about disability broadly, you probably have somebody with you with a mental health challenge. You probably,
absolutely. And they might be the person that you're criticizing for, right. Nancy did it. Nancy.
She's so dramatic, all that, the comments that people make,
And And it might be beyond Nancy's control. And Nancy might not be willing to go to see help, because for any adult to go to their employer and say, you know what, I need to see a psychotherapist. I need time off because I need to see a psychiatrist. I've got to take a mental health day off. Well, if I've got severe diarrhea, they're going to want me home, not at work.
Right.
But if I have severe depression, they're going to say, you're faking it.
Right.
Get over it.
Right.
Go do
Come
it.
to work.
Yeah. And severe depression is worse than severe diarrhea.
Yes, I think that is probably the line of the podcast.
Listen to the podcast. Severe diarrhea is not as bad.
We should clip that right there. And but I agree. Even the concept of a mental health day. I'm glad it's catching on. But people be like, "What is that? What do you need that for?" But yeah, what's wrong with it? You're feeling burnout, taking a day or two or three, and just stepping away for a while.
And I mean, it's funny. I had this discussion with somebody at a doctor's office last week about what a pastor does. And I think most clergy people, again, rabbis, pastors, priests, imams, probably our greatest responsibility is doing mental health work. It's counseling people. It's people come with a wide variety of troubles. The sad truth is a lot of clergy are not trained or do not have compassion, or say, oh, just let God take care of it and God will fix you. Just need God. Well, you know what? God's there, but God's given us psychiatrists, psychotherapists, meds that help. But I've known people who said, well, my pastor just said I need to pray and I'll be okay. No. Prayer means somebody's going to react, because God's not sending down little electrodes to change who you are.
Right. Pray and go to a therapist. Pray and talk to your doctor. Pray and talk to support groups. Pray.
And I believe in prayer, so I'm not dismissing prayer. I've got a great praying church, and we pray for people's health. But prayer requires then the action of people of faith. God has given us the wisdom to go and then refer somebody or go with somebody when they need to go to a psychiatrist. Say, I'll go with you so you don't feel alone. And there's nothing wrong with you for going to that psychiatrist or that psychotherapist. Right.
What's that? I know it's a brief thing and I'm probably butchering it, but there's that saying or that story, God, I was drowning. Why didn't you help me? Well, I sent you a boat. Like you had to get in the boat.
Oh yeah, no, it's true. I'm praying to be rescued, and I'm on an island, and there was the boat, there was a helicopter, and then the guy starts. God, why didn't? Well, I sent you the boat, I sent you the helicopter, and you stormed them. Well, that's not what I thought.
Yeah, I was. And what do you think we could do at a particular challenging mental health time? What do you think society could do better to help people with mental health issues?
It's a biggie, because we're in a time when bullying is at its strongest in my entire life. And people like to bully somebody they see as weak. Until we start saying we need to lift up our weak neighbors, we need to care for those who are hurting amongst us, it won't change. We have to stop saying they're crazy. They're nuts. They're off their meds. They're all, Instead, we have to be the caregivers. We have to, again, I'll be Pastor Dave again, and I could be Rabbi Dave or Imam Dave. I could be all three. We need to change our attitudes and love all of our neighbors. We need to say, a neighbor in trouble, in Christian theology, we have the story of the Good Samaritan, where the high exalted religious person left the person on the side of the road beaten to themselves. And then the rich and mighty person basically spat on the person. And it was the Samaritan who did not get along with the Jewish people, who went and helped the beaten Israeli and brought them back to health. And that's the one that Jesus says we're to be like, not like the religious leader who's full of themselves or the powerful person who's full of themselves, but we need to be the ones who care. And I think we have a greater challenge in this country right now to deal with mental health problems. You just have to look, you and I both are close to Philadelphia. You drive through Philadelphia and the streets are filled with folks who are camping out on the street. They're homeless. A lot of them have mental health challenges, but going back to Social Security and SSI, the housing for people with disabilities is abysmal. The healthcare availability for people with disabilities is just awful. So there's not enough psychiatrists, psychologists out there that they reject Medicaid. Well, I'm not going to take Medicaid. I have my rich office in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, or Linwood, New Jersey. I have leather couches and 4-inch wide, thick wood paneling. I'm not going to take the low life on Medicaid. I'll only take exclusive patients. Well, we need national health care. But I believe if we had a national health care system that everybody got the same benefits and that included mental health, that would be a huge step forward. But again, one of our political parties thinks somehow that it's wrong that everybody's cared for. They claim to be pro-life and they're the most anti-life people I've ever met.
All right, we're getting all of Dave's thoughts here. We're getting all of Dave's thoughts. Dave's gonna hopefully have a podcast soon. You can hear all his opinions, which are always very strong and poignant, and that will make you think about what we're doing as a society in terms of housing, in terms of healthcare, because it's all connected. We could always build more housing if we wanted to. There are forces that work against that, So
I don't know. I'm a little frustrated by the system right now and by where we're at. And this comes from me as a man of faith. It comes from me as a man who worked for the government system. And it comes from just a human being. And I look and I know how blessed my daughter is, that she's got her mom who helps with her peritoneal dialysis every night as she waits for a kidney, that Megan has a church family that absolutely loves her, that Megan is an incredible woman and is not out on the street. But I thought often, if all of a sudden I wasn't here and Donna wasn't here and Megan's sister wasn't here and Megan was just there, she couldn't defend herself, protect herself, communicate for herself. And Megan does not have a mental health challenge. She has a cognitive disability, but that cognitive disability is in itself just a great hindrance that you could call it a mental health problem, because Megan wouldn't know. And if she didn't have us out there, and there's a lot of people like Megan who don't have that network, and the mental health community, the young man that I'm going to talk to this afternoon, his parents have just given up. They didn't know when he's 38 years old. Young man, I'm showing how old I am. But we're in a time, and that's one of the values of the Atlantic County CIL. One of the reasons that the Center of Independent Living exists is to try to fill those gaps and provide that loving, caring support at a time when the storm outside is great.
I agree, and I will wrap up here, but I just think your message is, it starts with love, and I know it's corny, and I know it gets old, but we really got to think about the atmospheres we're creating and the policies we're doing, and are they really beneficial, and are they really moral? And there are plenty of places to disagree about things because the world's complicated, but we really got to think about how we can figure some of this stuff out. Some of this stuff there are solutions for. We just have to have the political will to do them, like we were talking about.
We have to be willing to go to the other side and say, let's choose a middle. We don't have to have a winner or a loser. Let's have everybody be a winner. Let's compromise. Let's give a little, and not just reward those who already have, but also think about providing for those who don't have.
Right, and that's what democracy is supposed to be about: compromise and finding middle ground, not just yelling and going on your favorite cable show to show how pure you are. So, but thank you, Dave. Thank you for joining us, and you're a great guest, and I can't wait to have you, and I can't wait till you start your podcast so we can do this again.
We'll see when that starts up, but I will be on the radio again.
It'll be awesome, and we'll be sure to promote it. Okay. Thank you, Damon.
Thanks, Donald.
All right, bye.